This is episode 618 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, it's been a busy couple of weeks here at Rio Grande Foundation. Of course, we started last week off with Corey DeAngelis and had that talk that he gave in Albuquerque about school choice and education reform. We'll be publishing his speech in Albuquerque as a standalone edition of Tipping Point, New Mexico in the not too distant future, with the holiday and travel plans on my part. Headed down to Alamogordo and did another event with him and got to see just a little bit of the plume of smoke at the time. Thankfully, the fire is on its way to being out down there in Ruidoso, but a lot of damage, a lot of lives altered and even destroyed. Came back from Alamogordo. Then a couple days later on Wednesday, I headed down to Las Cruces. Just narrowly got to town and got settled in my hotel room before the haboob rolled through Las Cruces. For those who don't know, haboob is a Middle Eastern term for dust storm. Really nasty storm. It was a unique experience, to say the least. Got the sky turning brown, which is not a color you want the sky to be no matter where you are. And then went and spoke to a Rotary Club in Deming, had a great event there, and the Concerned Citizens in Action group in Las Cruces, which a great group of folks down there as well. And, Doña Ana County, they say, as Doña Ana goes, so goes New Mexico. And of course, for the better part of the last decade, Doña Ana County has been a liberal, not just liberal, but left of the city of Albuquerque, at least on the local politics level, not to mention their legislative candidates and control. But that CCIA group is a good outfit, good group of people down there in Las Cruces. So some signs of life on the conservative, sane front in the city of Crosses there. So, but it's been a heck of a couple of weeks here, but with all the travels and whatnot. So good to be back. Of course, I'll be embarking on a family vacation here, driving much further than Las Cruces, all the way back to Ohio, but with the family and at a little more relaxed pace, perhaps.
Well, that's good. Hopefully it is a relaxed pace. And Paul, I don't believe you're going to be in an electric vehicle, so you will not have range anxiety and worry about charging. You'll just stop at a gas station.
Yes, no range anxiety. It is a gas-powered vehicle. We, driving across the Great Plains there, you can always have a little range anxiety
Yes.
because there's not a lot out there. Although off the interstate is okay. Although the first parts of our trip, we are eschewing the interstate and heading onto smaller roads. I have done this trip many, many, many times along the old Route 66 path through St. Louis and up to Indianapolis, over then to Cincinnati. We're going to do some touring on the way, which will include a visit to Hannibal, Missouri, Mark Twain Country, Springfield, Illinois, and a few other places. So hopefully it all goes well, but we're driving a Garcia Honda. So check out that podcast when you get a chance, if you're listening. Anyway, so looking forward to that particular trip. But it's travel season. Summer is a busy time, and we've got a lot going on, and more events, more action for the Rio Grande Foundation in mid and late July and into August. So if you have a civic organization wants to hear the free market message and what we can do to improve our economy, give us a call, shoot us an email, info@riograndefoundation.org. Uh, First thing that we can do is for the state of New Mexico to stop clinging to all of our cash. Now, a lot of my fiscally conservative friends say, oh, well, they're spending it all, and isn't keeping it in some account better? Well, I would say not really. I mean, yes, much of the money that we spend in this state is wasted. We could and do keep it in accounts that sit on the sidelines and are invested, but ultimately that just means more money for the state to spend with even less accountability. So I wrote an opinion piece that appeared in the Santa Fe New Mexican and some other papers, in which I labeled the state of New Mexico a hoarder, because we do have a lot of problems in our state. As I write in the article, New Mexicans suffer the third highest poverty rate among U.S. states. Our crime is among the very highest in the nation. New Mexico remains mired in last place, 50th in kids count. We have 0 Fortune 500 companies headquartered in New Mexico. Our basic infrastructure, including roads like Interstate 40, is deteriorating. And the population of New Mexico is aging fast and is the slowest growing state west of Kansas. So we have some problems that we could address. One of the ways we could address those problems, setting aside all the permanent funds and whatnot, is the capital outlay process, which has $4.5 billion in unspent capital accounts. So, I can think of a few ways I would be willing to spend some of those capital outlay dollars, but they're probably not the latest community or senior center or whatever boondoggle the governor or some individual legislator has decided that we should spend that money on.
Yeah, maybe restructure gross receipts tax. Yes, Paul, obviously we're not like the federal government. We have to have real money that comes in. We can't just print our own money. But from there on, we are now becoming U.S. government-like inefficient with regard to spending here in New Mexico. It's crazy. We allocate funds, they go nowhere, and the big thing is, what is the return on the money that is spent? That's we're doing good. We're doing a good job spending money. We're doing a good job hoarding it, but that money tends to not really bring results, whether it be education, law enforcement, or business climate. So those are the big three. We talk about those a lot. I talk about those a lot, but this is just looking at that issue through another lens. Is yeah, let's get that money out of there. It's get it back, get it in the economy. And again, they said for years, it's too risky. We don't have the money to restructure gross receipts tax. Well, guess what? Now we do. Now we just need the political will to do that, and we certainly have enough money to do it. Because guess what? Newsflash. Uh, will oil and gas be a big deal 300 years from now? I'm not sure, but I'm sure 10, 20, or 30 years. So I don't think we have a lot to worry about here in our state with regard to the money flowing in.
No, the money will flow in. Oil and gas remains very, very strong and very much in demand. And obviously, a global economic downturn could always change that situation. But, you and I talked regularly on this show throughout the entire COVID pandemic. And yes, the Trump administration in particular, and then followed that with the Biden administration, did pump a bunch of money into our state and other states, unwisely, I might add. But honestly, New Mexico never really missed a beat in terms of, yeah, oil prices went way down, but they recovered very quickly and then went beyond recovery and were at very high levels. And it just, the idea that we are going to, because this is a production driven boom, unlike past, which was a price driven boom, that we are going to go into some decline. I mean, we pretty easily survived one of the greatest economic and political crises of either of our lifetimes. that didn't really do anything negatively for the long term. You can argue one fiscal year we had some economic challenges as a state, but whether it was right or wrong, certainly I would say that the federal government should not have bailed out all the states and gone further into debt. And that's one of the big mistakes that President Trump made while he was in office. But overall, I just the reticence to do anything to really boldly address New Mexico's economic challenges is an indicator of the lack of vision and the misunderstanding or lack of understanding of basic economic principles among our state leadership.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And yes, during the COVID era, when things were a little tight, some interesting things happening. The federal government basically carpet bombed New Mexico and the other 49 states with money. So, yeah, that didn't turn out to be as big of a deal as everyone thought. Although, as we look now, as what is it, close to 20% inflation over the past few years, cumulatively, a lot of that is related to that very thing that was done by the federal government. So,
Yeah, now it'd be interesting to see. One of the challenges is New Mexico is sitting on all of these pots of money, but because of and I appreciate the concept that you're going to protect them and put them off limits, most of these pots of money. Some of them are just true rainy day funds. Some of them are other sovereign wealth funds that they do not want them to be super easily accessible. So there is a time delay. You have to have the constitutional amendment, as we saw in the pre-K, and the accessing of those funds is indeed a challenge. But again, COVID was a extremely unique event and an extremely significant event. It would have been an interesting counterfactual to see how New Mexico might have fared relative to other states, because we do have those piles of cash on the sidelines, and if we had used them effectively. But that's a lot of ifs, a lot of if the federal government doesn't do anything, if we use those dollars, if we can access them. Instead, yeah, federal government carpet bombed New Mexico and every other state in the country. So did not get that experiment. But New Mexico might have actually fared relatively well. It would not have been outside the realm of expectation that New Mexico had the potential to come out of that economic the COVID situation had we had a better governor.
So we had some self-inflicted damage that was done from a policy point of view coming out of that. That some surrounding states did much better, and kind of an analog to the inflation that came out of that area is now we're suffering from a lot of hangover on a lot of things, crime and education, business as a result. So some of those things, you don't want to say never, but it may take a while for them to recover.
Yeah. Now, the counterfactual. Now, Hawaii is a extremely blue state. Hawaii is a state that did lock down heavily during COVID. Their tourist-driven economy suffered dramatically, and I didn't participate nor follow particularly closely the debates over recent significant tax reductions in the state of Hawaii, but suffice it to say that Hawaii is probably the only state in the U.S. that is, I would call, significantly bluer or more progressive than New Mexico. But even the Aloha state decided to dramatically reduce their tax burden on the personal income tax. Now, they did so in a way that it's not necessarily how I would have chosen it. They have a top rate of 11% in Hawaii. Of course, they have zero oil and gas. So they're a very different economy in a lot of ways. Very isolated as a state, very dependent on tourism, which did not go well for them during COVID, but they were very locked down and still, months and months, even years after kind of the worst of COVID had passed, they were still imposing dramatic restrictions on people to get there. But Again, I don't know exactly how the debate went, but their standard deduction, this is how much you can make before you have to pay income tax. Their standard deduction currently is 4,400 for a married couple, 2,200 for a single couple or a single individual. We haven't quite gone that far down the relations path yet. It's a single couple. Uh, that will move up to 24,000 and 12,000 in the not too distant future. And a lot of people will no longer be paying the very top rate of 11%. That will only kick in about $475,000. So, uh, you know, again, Hawaii is an expensive place to live, but a lot of people in Hawaii are going to get a very nice tax reduction in the form of personal income tax cuts. Uh, and I don't know, again, I don't know what Hawaii's overall financial picture is, but there is not a single state in the entire USA that I would say comes close, not just comparable, but comes close to being as an advantageous financial position, not socially, not economically, not educationally, all of the follow on and knock on effects. But because of the oil and gas industry, we have more cash than really any place else in the nation. And if Hawaii can cut taxes, we can cut taxes.
Yeah, and Paul, Hawaii is a little bit of a different place, and I will liken it to parts of Santa Fe where the people who pay income taxes in Santa Fe are people who have income, or in Hawaii or Santa Fe, people have to live there. There are a lot of second and third homes of the mega rich in Hawaii, and the what's the level below mega rich? That's what lives in Santa Fe. The pretty darn rich in Santa Fe. But yeah, that if Hawaii can do it, New Mexico can do it. Yes, New Mexico can do it. Will we do it? We will see. But I do think the time is now, because anyone who says anything about diversifying New Mexico's economy without addressing the gross receipts taxes, they are, what shall we say? They're not telling the full story.
Yeah. Well, the gross receipts tax is something that could be addressed simply, quickly, easily, uh, and relatively and nearly painlessly. Actually, it would forego a lot of economic pain for a lot of business owners who have to deal with that harmful tax. But
Well,
yeah,
and then Paul, there'd be a transition period where I'm sure total receipts would go down, but there are a lot of things that are done by businesses large and small every day that do everything they can to move their business to surrounding states. Because guess what? If you sell something from Texas into New Mexico, you don't pay the gross receipts tax. If you sell something from New Mexico into New Mexico, you do. It's that simple. And when it used to be closer to 5 or 6%, but now it's up in the 7, 8, and some places 9. It people adjust their activities accordingly. And we actually have a Supreme Court ruling that says there's nothing wrong with structuring your activities to minimize tax. And that's what a lot of people do. And the state actually is hurt by our high gross receipts and all encompassing much more than it would if they'd restructure it.
absolutely. All right. Last week we talked a little bit about the kids count report, and uh, that's the Annie E. Casey report that analyzes based on 16 different variables how New Mexico and other states fare with regard to children. Uh, Voices for Children, again, the bete noir of the Rio Grande Foundation, not because we could be good friends, progressives in the Rio Grande Foundation, on a lot of different issues if they had just a shred of principles. But as I've stated and will restate now here, Voices for Children is a tool of the Democratic Party. They don't actually care about policies that improve the lives of low income people. They want to make sure that their preferred politician gets reelected. And that's Michelle Lujan Grisham and the so called progressives in the legislature, progressive, socialist, whatever you want to call them. And it was not a surprise to me that Voices put out a statement in the wake of the Kids Count report that at once tried to downplay the results, but also uh, did so in a way that was just that would be criticized heartily if it was done by a conservative group like the Rio Grande Foundation. So I'm going to read this, Wally, and then we can discuss. So here's the quote, and you can find this all at errorsofenchantment.com. New Mexico's ranking in the education domain is heavily impacted by national standardized test scores, including fourth grade reading proficiency, said Emily Wildow, Kids Count coordinator at New Mexico Voices for Children. My apologies if I mispronounced her name. Reading proficiency is critical for students to succeed academically and as adults. These scores do not reflect the ability of our children, but rather an education system that is not designed with our multicultural, multilingual students in mind. And goes on. But Wally, it's almost, they just stick their toe almost. This is like Corey DeAngelis is ready to greet them on the other side of the Rainbow Bridge, and they can just come over to our side and support educational choice. But they will not. They will not go that direction. They just want to complain and say that the education system is racist.
Yes. And so people, these standardized tests, let me just say that, a student can have a bad day on one and not do well. But one of the reasons they're so valuable is they are an excellent indication of academic competence. That's why they're used. And so it reminds me of a scene in The Jerk with Steve Martin where he's standing by the oil cans. And so somebody's shooting at him and they hit the oil cans. It's like, it's the oil cans, get away. Well, in this case, it's like, it's the standardized test. Let's not take standardized tests and everything will be okay. The other thing about is, well, it just makes people teach to the test. This is, Paul, among the highest performing people I've been associated with, and I've read research about this, is that frequent testing is one of the best learning methodologies. So it's like you say, well, we need less testing and more learning. Well, guess what? Taking tests continually, as you learn materials, one of the best ways to learn and know what you don't know and know what you need to go back and do. But somehow in New Mexico, because things are going poor, it's racist. Paul, Voices for Children remind me of the Washington Generals, the basketball team that plays the Harlem Globetrotters. And an exact record is not known, but I'm going to say it's approximately 6 wins and 16,000 losses. And so Voices for Children's a lot like the coach of the Washington Generals. And if you don't know, it's the team that plays the Harlem Globetrotters, and they're almost never allowed to win. But they're like the coach of the Washington Generals. We're having a good year. We think we might even win another one. We know we're going to lose 99 out of 100 or 999 out of 1,000 games. Voices for Children they're going to have to do some soul searching about this, because how do you spin last? And that's what they're trying to do. We're last, but for somehow there's good news in all of this. And maybe the good news is there's nowhere to go but up. But here's the thing. If you remain a bottom dweller for last year after year after year, they might as well fold up shop.
Yeah, well, that's what they would. That's another statement that they made. That was in the Journal, kind of. The pre-K hasn't quite fully kicked in. Of course, we've had universal pre-K for a year or so, but we've had taxpayer-funded pre-K for darn near 20 years in this state. One might think that a group like Voices for Children would do a study to show the positive impact of the control group versus, or the on the pre-K group versus the control group. So,
but there is a problem, Paul.
Oh, tell me,
the,
please.
the problem is the data doesn't show that that's a
Oh,
very effective intervention with regard to academic achievement. That's one of the big arguments against universal pre-K is it's spending money in a place that doesn't make a lot of difference. But that doesn't mean we don't love it. So, you know, universal pre-K is kind of at the same position of electric vehicles right now in economy. It's like it has a lot of hype, but it just doesn't have a lot of immediate benefit. And unlike electric vehicles that at some point probably will become more popular and get some market share, will that ever pay dividends for New Mexico, or do we need to do something else, something more, but in another area?
so here are my rebuttals to be found at errorsofenchantment.com. And I just added one. New Mexico spends a great deal on K-12 education. Some states spend more and some spend less, but New Mexico has been nowhere near the bottom in K-12 spending for years. Of course, we have plenty of money in oil and gas as well, and they have been jacking up education budgets, not just in the last few years, but uh, even during the challenging days of the Susana Martinez administration. She was adding pre-K funds. Bill Richardson spent generously with K-12. Gary Johnson even grew K-12 spending quite significantly. What happened to pre-K as the savior? Of course, I discussed that. We discussed that. Test scores are just two of the Kids Count Report's variables. So, two of 16 variables they're complaining about, essentially trying to blame those for the entire outcome. Maybe if we talked about two-parent families, ha ha ha. Can you imagine Voices for Children coming out and talking about parents and trying to
Yes,
emphasize two-parent?
strengthen
Yeah,
families. So
not going to happen anytime soon. Hell will freeze over first. Uh, Minorities can't perform well on standardized tests. To say the least, that seems a bit racist and
very.
would be labeled as such if it were conservative, making that point. Uh, Finally, to that point, many states with large populations of Black and Hispanic students perform well, or at least far better than New Mexico on the NAEP. That's the test that is in question, the National Assessment of Educational Progress. I looked at, and I was surprised. Maryland has quite a large uh, minority population when it comes to students. The general population of your state is going to be different from the minority population, and that shows up in New Mexico in particular. But Florida, California as well, Texas, all have large minority populations, yet they blow New Mexico out of the water. Mississippi, we've talked about how they have improved education, and obviously, I could throw a dart at the board and find the other 49 states all perform better than
Yeah,
New Mexico.
when you're last, it's not hard to find an example of someone doing better.
Yeah, and then I just added almost they could be taken as endorsing school choice, because this line about uh, the education system not designed with our multicultural, multilingual students in mind. Well, you know what? When you have
Are they saying there's a one size fits all
a
government
one size
approach?
fits all approach, I know it's the horseshoe almost comes
Yeah.
full circle, but they will not go that far, because, of course, we know that the Democratic Party, the left politically, by and large, there are some, but very rarely do left wingers just jump out and lead the parade on behalf of school choice. So we would welcome the Voices for Children to debates and discussions
Well,
about
yeah,
school
and
choice in New Mexico.
we would welcome that. And Paul, I would say that we would even, guess what? We get a little fired up here and we get sarcastic occasionally. We would make a commitment to not be sarcastic and just listen to their answers, whatever they are, because not to give them more more power, more credit, or more blame, however you look at it, than they deserve. But they really do represent the kind of what would you say, baseline thinking when it comes to these issues in New Mexico, and that is not gotten us anywhere. And so, if even they're getting tired of being last and are going to change, maybe there is an opportunity for for groups like the Rio Grande Foundation and Voices for Children to get on the same page and again really help improve this in New Mexico, as opposed to just either whining about it, ignoring it, or making excuses.
Yeah, I would say that they're a combination of ignoring it and offering excuses. Speaking of excuses, the Pew Center on the States made a recent report available that highlighted population growth and shifts since 2008, and that's 15 years worth of data. Of course, that also happens to be the 15 years which have seen the beginning of New Mexico really stagnating and slowing down when it comes to population growth. Why? Obviously, we suffered from a massive economic crisis in 2008. Uh, what happened there, I don't know. But the fact is that according to the Pew Center on the States, New Mexico is the slowest growing state west of Kansas. So take all the states, including Alaska and Hawaii, and during that time period from 2008 to 2023, New Mexico, New Mexico's population grew slower than any other state in the country, which is pretty mind blowing, I think. Change due to net migration, 0% growth. The average state was 0.27% growth. So, uh, we didn't see a lot of migration from other states overall. I think perhaps the most concerning is that projected by 2040, New Mexico will start losing population, according to the Pew Center. So that is really concerning, and we've talked in other episodes about the challenges of having a declining population. But I'm a big believer in economist Julian Simon. He's the one that famously won the bet over the price of certain goods, some metals and stuff, back in the 80s. And he had this famous quote, which basically said, the greatest resource is the human mind. And we can have all the oil and gas we want, but if we don't use those dollars to attract more people, preferably smart people, but it doesn't have to, there doesn't need to be a specific policy to drive only smart people to come to New Mexico. Lord knows that having the labs here hasn't necessarily resulted in great things for the state of New Mexico. It really has to be the free market policies, and those help the human minds flourish and bring prosperity and growth to a society. And unfortunately, we just haven't gotten our political leadership ready or in a position where they're willing to embrace free markets and limited government as the solution to what ails us.
Yes, and Paul, another way to say this is that in addition to just the absolute population in New Mexico not growing almost at all, our demographics is not getting better. We're getting older. And then when we do have some bright spots, we do have a lot of students that go to college here, but guess what? When they graduate, they tend to go to other states to work and not stay in our state. So it's like we're unable to retain, again, the best and brightest, the resource you talked about, the human mind. The human minds in New Mexico, those that are going from academic to the work world, tend to be going to other places. So that is a huge thing, and it's probably not going to get better until it does. But I do think that looking at the demographics and the population is just another way to keep score, and New Mexico's not doing real well on that. So,
Exactly. Um, Rebecca Dow, who heads up our OAK NM Education Reform Project, had an opinion piece recently. It ran in the Albuquerque Journal, focusing on, essentially calling out the governor for obsessing about school lunch policies and this crazy idea of growing the food on campus and all the expense and all the problems that could result from that, while she prefers to deflect attention from student outcomes. And, I think, it's funny how school lunches suddenly became a political issue. I mean, granted, I went to Catholic schools, but, and our food was fine. A lot of pizza. It was okay. And, we can, on one side, and this was encountered during the Obama years, and Michelle Obama, I know one of her big things was healthier school lunches. And, there was a recent Trevor cartoon about horses and being led to water and not making them drink, but it was actually talking about voters turning out in the last election. But that saying does ring true when it comes to school lunches, because uh, for a lot of kids, they do not want salads and fruits and vegetables, no matter how healthy, no matter how free range, no matter how organic or nutritious they may be. So we're kind of dealing with two different aspects of the same problem. I will say that I think it is wise to leave most of the school lunch decisions to the people who are in the trenches, so to speak.
yes.
The child or young person consuming the lunch, the parents who are either paying for the lunch or paying for, or presumably providing some resources for them, although, of course, New Mexico, well documented, solved all of our problems by giving away free lunches. No payments required. And then, of course, the, kind of how nutritious do we make these meals? Because uh, you hit that, it's kind of like the Laffer curve.
Oh yeah, there's a point of diminishing returns, and over the years, Paul, I've seen healthy school lunch programs, experiments that have happened, and they show if given a choice what food is selected, and then they show what's thrown away. Where potato chips seldom thrown away, uh, mixed vegetables often thrown away. So
Yeah, it's obviously critical to try to provide something resembling a healthy, nutritious meal for students, but you're also squaring the circle of trying to make sure that those food items are actually consumed. And,
And can you still bring your lunch to school? I don't even know. I
I'm
suspect you still can in the
as
public
long as there's no
schools.
peanuts in there or
Or yes,
craziness like that.
but at some point, if the school lunches are not to people's liking, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich compared to something you don't like might not be a bad choice. So
Yeah. Anyway, check out Rebecca's piece from the Sunday Albuquerque Journal. I'm sure it'll run in some other places across the state.
and is that rule still under consideration, Paul?
So the comment period ended at the end of May, and it is still being, debated, discussed, whatever, behind closed doors at PED. And I'm sure the governor's got her hand in that whole debate. But uh, the way it works, as far as I've seen with some of these regulations, is that the agency may or may not come up with a regulation that kind of addresses the issue. They may punt it, they may reject it. Most of the time, they don't outright reject it, because then they can always keep it out there for a future decision on the part of the executive. But I suspect that the governor, knowing the way she operates, will ultimately do whatever the heck she darn well pleases at some point in time. And, of course, the schools are concerned about the financial resources available and just the logistics of all of this. And I think that's going to be a very critical issue. I would not be stunned if the governor did, in fact, go through with this then had to face a lawsuit, as we see on the 5-day, 4-day school week issue. But we shall see. We'll just say that the ball is in the governor's court, aka PED's court, and we'll see what happens from there. So
Yeah, and Paul, just politically, this would be, in my opinion, first of all, was this her deal, or did somebody say, "Hey, how about we do a better school lunch rule?" And she's like, "Go for it."
well, this issue's been around for a while,
Yeah.
and the governor didn't have to jump on to this bandwagon.
Oh no, but what I'm saying is this would be an easy one to die and just let go off
That's
quietly
true.
into the night. There are some people, and let me just say that we're not saying there isn't healthy food, but this was so over the top. We are going to have methane methane leaks. We're going to have food problems. A lot of the things are counter to the food code that people have to, that food has to be served under. There's just so many problems with this. Is maybe we could let this one die and actually work on education, but we'll wait and see. You could be right. They could just force this through, and we'll let the courts figure it out.
Yep, wouldn't be the first time. All right, well, we're going to leave it there. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point, New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.